Hello and welcome to the Posture Dojo podcast. My name is Sam Miller, your host on this postural transformation journey, sharing some stories from my own postural transformation and healing of an 85-degree hyperkyphosis and scoliosis, as well as speaking with experts from a variety of fields, some you might expect and some that might surprise you. Today, I am excited to have Ankoor on the podcast, and we're going to be diving into his area of expertise as a movement coach. Ankoor, how did you end up doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Sam. So it all started, I was a corporate employee till 2018, and I left it and became a personal trainer. So I was more focused into muscle building and fat loss. Then I did my CSCS, which is strength and conditioning certification. So I got into more strength and conditioning stuff. And then lockdown happened. And I started diving deep into Instagram, talking to coaches from all around the globe. And then I stumbled upon Postural Restoration Institute and Bill Hartman. So I think these two, so Bill Hartman is one of the people I look up to. His model is something that I follow, and also Postural Restoration Institute. So when I got to know about how the human body actually works, the principles behind it, and how it's not a liver pulley system, it's more fluid-based compression and expansion model that works with humans, that kind of blew my mind because whatever I had learned in my strength and conditioning and personal training certification, it was all opposite of that. And I was like, no, I have to learn this stuff. And then when I started diving deep into this stuff, compression and expansion and human movement, I started to see people get out of pain, like within a session, 2 sessions, their posture, the resting state of their posture changing. And that was a mind blowing moment for me when I got to discover this. And then I understood, okay, let me get into this niche and let me make this the skill, my skill, and let me focus solely on this rather than strength and conditioning or personal training. So now I help people with postural issues, the asymmetries and imbalances, and breathing issues, pain, joint issues, and other such stuff, biomechanical stuff. So it's been quite a journey, but I'm loving it, every moment of it.
Amazing. And I have a bone to pick with you because on your website, you're saying
Yeah.
you want to see people who are scared to move and be active to help them trust their bodies and live their
Yes.
lives to the fullest, develop
Yes.
fitness qualities without
Yeah.
fixating on posture. Now, this is the Posture Dojo podcast. Now
Oh,
I
yes.
have a feeling I know where you're coming from, and I believe that there isn't the perfect posture that we should all subscribe to. But
Yes.
when we're putting the message out there, sometimes we need to say words that people know to kind of
Yes.
invite them into that space. And I'm careful about saying people with scoliosis and kyphosis because it creates people with kyphosis and
Oh,
scoliosis
yeah.
when in actuality they are this beautiful human unfolding that has a structure in certain situations, a structure that may have been compromised. And there's so much they can do. And sometimes the labels help us, and sometimes the labels
Oh,
hold us
yes.
back.
Yeah.
So, how do you approach this label of
Yeah.
posture in the human body?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought it up. So I feel so when a client does sessions with me, it's not just the drills that I ask that person to do. I also educate that person that okay, asymmetry is normal. It's just that the magnitude of asymmetry right now is a bit on the higher side, and we have to reduce it so that the stress distribution within the joints can be much better, and you improve your chances of reducing pain or eliminating it without fixating. So this is like a double-edged sword. If you want to also create an awareness versus, there are people who will get fixated, but unless you address it, it's not going to so unless you address it, it's not going to create an awareness. So what I want people to do is, okay, understanding things, being educated. It's not just going through an Instagram post or YouTube video where the person talks about it and you're like, oh my God, what has happened to me? It's about going to a coach who is professional, a professional coach, where you can learn from that coach. Okay, this is what it means. It's not something that Like, it's not that serious. If you work on yourself, you can change a lot of things in your body, your pain or your symptoms or your resting postural state. You can change it. You can be more expanded with proper work and proper homework. Assuring words of assurance, which actually help the clients to understand, okay, so the like you open Google for your symptoms, and you might end up saying, oh, these symptoms are for cancer or tumor. Google gives you cancer or tumor if you just search about it. But then when you go to a professional, medical professional, and then the person tells you, okay, no, this is a small issue, you just have good food or a few medicines or whatever, and your issues will be done. So that's the kind of thing, like, you have to go to a professional to understand what it actually means in that context. So that's what I meant. Like, you have to use words, otherwise how are you going to even communicate? So that's what I feel.
Yeah, so let's understand, I guess, what was that traditional physical trainer understanding of the body, and then what is it now? And that's where you were mentioning compression, expansion, and a fluid-based body. So I'm curious, like, what was it before, and what is it? How do you see the body now?
Okay, so that's interesting. I see the body now as areas which are compressed, areas which are expanded. I see it that way. So suppose an example of someone with forward head posture, as they say, forward head, traditional classic forward head. This, if you go to Google or any traditional, someone who practices traditional stuff, they're going to say overactive pecs, front delts maybe, and weak back muscles. So they will ask you to do this. There's the difference between the compression expansion fluid based model versus the traditional model. Tight pecs, front delts, yes, but they're the result. It's not the cause, they're the result. So stretching won't help them. What is going to help is, you see, it's a forward head pushed forward, but it's a chest wall that cannot expand. That's a diaphragm that cannot move. The diaphragm cannot pump. Diaphragm, thoracic diaphragm, and the pelvic diaphragm, they cannot pump the organs inside the body, and hence you get this. And here you also get the shoulder joint coming up and over, a shoulder that is shoulder blades protracted and like this. So this is the same as a pelvis dumping forward. It's the same representation of the shoulder dumping forward, which compresses this area, compresses the back. So if you strengthen the back, it's going to make things worse, because now your front and back compressed in the starting point. Now you're squeezing it hard, you're compressing the back even more. The solution to this is to be able to expand the front as well as the back, which will give you that tall vertical looking posture, as they say, tall vertical looking resting state, with the head placed over the rib cage and not ahead. So that's like an example where this fluid-based compression expansion model comes into play, and the traditional stretching and strengthening won't work.
How does the fluid-based piece of that come into this?
Oh yes, fluid. So the pumping of organs, that's extremely crucial. So what happens is, when the chest cannot expand, when the back cannot expand. So imagine a toothpaste tube. So this is the, what is that called? Okay, I have this tube. Okay, perfect. So this is the pelvis ribcage area. So this is the ribcage area, and this is the pelvic area. If I squeeze the pelvis area, squeeze the ribcage area, a ribcage that is compressed, cannot expand, all the fluid volume, all the guts, they will move towards the pelvic floor, and they will be pushing onto the pelvic floor. So you see people with pooch belly, like skinny fat, as they say. It's like entire body is skinny, but they have this huge hanging lower abdomen. It's the organs pushing downward and forward all the time, and getting the pelvis into this anterior pelvic tilt, but it's actually anterior orientation, whole pelvis moving as a whole. So because of this squeeze, everything goes down. Hence the explanation behind that pooch belly. Now, what would be the goal? The goal would be to be able to expand the rib cage so that we have the space here, up here, so that the organs can go up, and we have the space, organs go up, the pelvic floor gets relaxed. Usually what you will see, people who are squeezed in the pelvis rib cage, organs fall down, they come down, and you'll see those people when they breathe, they're belly breathers, massive belly breathers. Their rib cage does not move, it's just the belly moving. You'll also see them herniated disc issues, knee joint issues, ankle issues, hip issues, pelvic floor issues, because the inability of the organs to move up and back. So that's the reason.
And so part of looking at it from that perspective, then we're like, okay, though that technique where you're kind of leaning over into a half crawling position, exhaling and then sucking in the belly, or creating, I guess, using your diaphragm as a vacuum to experience the other side. I guess that would be the opposite of that pouch belly, right? Would be to go in the other
I
direction.
personally, I do not coach it that way. I coach slow, silent, gentle inhalation and exhalation. So what gives us relative motion in the body? So what I mean by this is relative motion within the joints. So all the joints in our body, they kind of, when we move, they kind of move slightly opposing to each other, and that creates stress distribution in the joints. So for example, as we walk, as the foot hits the ground and the ankle, okay, I have a foot model. So as the foot hits the ground, the inner heel and the ball of big toe in touch, and as the shin goes forward, relative motion at the foot is happening, which is pronation. When the shin goes forward, the upper tibia, the upper shin, internally rotates, whereas the the lower femur, it externally rotates in the optimal world as you go forward in pronation. So that's like moving slightly relative to each other. So that gives great stress distribution in the body. Now, coming to breathing. When I coach breathing, it is slow, silent, gentle.
Interesting. And I guess an extension of that, sorry, yeah, just to add to that, I guess when we're walking, our pelvis is going this way, but our rib cage in our hand is going the other way, right? Because when we're walking or running, we're also distributing that stress, that same kind of counter rotation throughout the body.
I would say it's actually looks like it's going in a different way, but actually it's just a delay. It's going in the same direction, but just at different speed. So the rotation starts down up through the foot and goes up. So the body goes into one direction, the pelvis, the sacral base, the sac
In that spiral,
Ah,
right?
yes, the sacral base and the area between the shoulder blades, they move in the same direction. It's just that the rate is pretty different, and that's what creates the look of counter rotation. But when we talk about exhalation, I would not ask someone to suck in. I would just ask that person to get into a position, suppose side lying or supine or prone, whatever suits that person, to be in a position where your head, rib cage, pelvis are kind of stacked, as they say. It's the concept where pelvic floor, thoracic diaphragm, and the cranium, the skull, are kind of in a straight vertical line, and you just gently breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, gentle, without any muscular tension, because the more muscular tension you have, the more muscles contract, it will compress the axial skeleton even more. I want total relaxation, melt on the ground, totally relax, and then you'll see slowly the movement happening. Usually, I start them in a side lying. So, what happens in a side lying is you're lying suppose you're lying on left side. So this is my left, I'm lying on my left side. So, this left side rib cage will be on the ground, pressed by the ground. Right side rib cage will be pressed by gravity. Gravity is squeezing there, floor is squeezing there. So when we squeeze the sides, the front and back expand. Why this? Because as we get compressed over time, as we lose mobility over time, our front and back dimensions of the rib cage and pelvis, they get smaller, and we expand laterally. You'll see people walking with duck feet, or you will see, let me give an extreme example, bodybuilders or powerlifters who become like this. So that's because they can't put it here, they can't put their arms here. It hurts, or too much muscle activity, because you have squeezed through your muscles, your axial skeleton is squeezed so much from the front to back that now you're expanded here. So there's volume of air here, and if there is air volume here, it will stop you from coming towards your side. So that stops you. So everything goes out as you get compressed. Hence, if you lie down in side lying, compress the sides, front and back expand, slow, silent, gentle breathing. Slowly the shape change at the rib cage and pelvis starts happening. The connective tissue, the fascia, tendons, ligaments, everything, those stuff are very stiff. They slowly start relaxing and you slowly start changing the shape of that person.
Is there a breath that you like to help create? Is there like a default breath that you like to create? And where does that contract and expand in the body?
To get maximum motion in the body, like front and back expansion, always breathe tidal volume in your gentle, slow tidal volume. So, suppose, so that's the tidal volume breathing. What happens when people try to overdo things? Suppose, and then what happens? I extend my back. Muscles on my back starts getting activated. I extend my back. Or suppose people try to over exhale and then they pull the sternum down using their six pack and they don't get proper diaphragm movement. When you want proper diaphragm movement, you have to be relaxed where your chest muscles, no activity in the chest muscle, in the trap, in the neck, in the back, in the six pack, especially the upper head. No activity. You feel nothing. And then just gentle tidal volume breathing. You get that front to back dimension opening up.
So we really relax everything and become a very slowly contracting, expanding
Yes.
diaphragm
So people, so
in any
yes,
direction, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. So where the goal is to be as relaxed when you are standing, walking, doing your day-to-day activities. Because a lot of people struggle even in side lying, supine, or the breathing drill position, where the gravity impact on the body is pretty less. You're unweighted on the floor. A lot of people struggle even there. Imagine them walking, doing their day-to-day activities. That is why they struggle. Most of my clients struggle with their day-to-day life because gravity is squeezing them and they're fighting really hard to stay upright. Lot of muscle tension squeezing their axial skeleton, and that causes issues over time.
What is the approach of the Postural Restoration Institute, and have you like where's your current approach? Is that kind of at the core of how you're
Yes,
looking at
Postural
this?
Restoration Institute and Bill Hartman. Bill Hartman's model, shout out to Bill Hartman. So, incredible model of his. How do I see body is okay. If I look at someone standing, front, back, and both the sides, I can see. So when someone is standing from the sides, I can see, okay, the chest is compressed or the back is compressed. What is the shoulder doing? What's the chest doing? What's the abdomen, the guts in the abdomen doing? If, because a lot of people are compressed so much front to back, the center of gravity like moves, their weight is on their forefoot. So you will see them standing like Leaning Tower of Pisa. So their knees are constantly in an extended bias. So you might also see people who have this knee joint kind of going backwards, you like this shape. It's not backwards, but it's just a twist happening. So they're massively extended. If you see from the front, you can see the flatness on the chest if it is compressed, or it's the bilateral. So whatever I talked about is bilateral. Now let's talk about asymmetries. So now there's asymmetry going on. Like the left side of the human body is pushed forward always pushed forward in all humans. And then as you get more and more compressed, the right side also starts getting compressed. And then there is then this end point where everything, like all the relative motion kind of stops and you start orienting, walking like this. So people who are pulled down on one side or the other, when they're limping while walking, they don't have rotation in the rib cage and pelvis. So, and hence, to apply force into the ground, they have to do this instead of this. So walking, the gait, the pictures, the assessment like hip flexion, straight leg raise, hip internal external rotation, shoulder flexion, shoulder internal external rotation, it says a lot about what the person is doing. So in a nutshell, if you lose external rotation measures, you're losing posterior or back expansion of the rib cage and pelvis. If you're losing internal rotation, you're losing uh, anterior expansion or chest expansion. So that's how I see the human body. Like which side is doing what, how far forward the left is, then how far forward the right is, and then after a point the right side gets pulled down. You'll see people with one shoulder much lower than the other. So the lower side is the one which is massively compressed front to back and then pulled down to produce force into the ground, because humans will produce force into the ground anyway. So that's their strategy. People who are expanded can alternate and reciprocate versus massively compressed people.
I mean, and with our breaths, we're in this constant state of expanding and contraction. And it seems like your perspective of the body is about looking for misalignments or asymmetries or like I guess extra asymmetries and extra misalignments that may be adding stress or tension to the structure. Ultimately, the goal, what is, how would you describe the goal?
I help people, first of all, get their breathing mechanics right. Second, using positions so that I can then address right and left asymmetries. Third would be to get them from this breathing drills which are least gravity involved, side lying, prone, supine, to slowly get towards the seated, slowly get towards upright, standing, split squat, squat. So there's this another world out there right now. How you lift weights will also determine if the process is going to be an interference, like whatever you're doing is going to work well, or it's going to be an interference. So let me explain. Someone with back stiffness, tight neck and tight traps, you you do a sideline breathing, you do a supine breathing, that person feels great. Okay, my rib cage is moving well, pelvis is moving well, my tension has gone away, great. Then that person goes to the gym and does a barbell back squat or a back arched bench press, and then you're going into the same pattern again of squeezing the axial skeleton front and back to move heavy loads. So that is where the interference in the weight room gets created. I would go for something like a split squat or safety bar squat, where you can still keep the space between the shoulder blades open and not crunching. So like this, or a goblet squat, split squat. Even in case of bench press, I would avoid that if pain is your first goal to accomplish. Like I want to be pain free, then avoid interferences, get into a supine hook lying press. That would be much better, where your entire back will be flushed on the floor. You will be much more relaxed. Your lumbar spine will be much more relaxed, and then you can press from there. Strength. So there's this mobility or relative motion in a spectrum, and then there's this maximum strength. The extreme you go towards one way or the other, you're going to compromise the other end. So a lot of strength, like maximum strength, that comes at a cost that makes you stiffer. And if you're always working towards mobility, joint freedom, force production will suck. So you have to find a middle ground according to your goals. If you're a gen pop, you want to have decent amount of muscle mass because that helps in a lot of other things. But you also want your joints to be happy, because your goal is not to lift the maximum weights as a gen pop. Powerlifters, bodybuilders, that's a different sport that they play. They have to be there. Hence, they're in an extreme. I'm not comparing Gen Pop with them. So it's the goal of the person in front of us which will determine like how we program the weight training. Because weight training, if done in a way where you are getting a lot of front to back compression, chances are it will create interferences and you probably won't be able to get over your pain issues or discomfort or movement limitation issues.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down in there. Definitely that before building strength and going for that kind of goal, there's a lot to be done. And so you mentioned breathing mechanics. That's similar. I would also include in that first phase, at least in the processes that I'm doing really with unraveling. which is around myofascial releasing, some breath work there, understanding that there's also might be some emotional elements in there, right? Traumas that are stored in the body energetically as well. Getting those things out of the way first, or at least understanding how they are and how they're being presented in the body, and then moving into the alignment and then the strength building. And for me, the goal really is an all-terrain capability. I think, yeah, going into these extremes, your body, if you become a power lifter or if you go in certain directions with athletic endeavors, your body will react and it will adapt. It becomes a reflection of your environment. Now, is that always functional? Not always. For most people with structural compromises like scoliosis and kyphosis, I would suggest that the goal is function. How do you want to live life for the long term into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? Like, how do you want to live during those years and start optimizing for that now? Identify the functions that you want in those years and then start mastering them and ironing out those patterns now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like it's totally goal dependent because you have to learn a lot of things before you go to the gym. Like whenever you start lifting, I wish I knew this when I had started, like foot points of contact, tibia, foot, thigh, rib cage, cranium, hand positioning while lifting so that I can keep the as much expansion as possible while I'm building muscle. So that would be the goal because you'll see people who have a down chest wall, shoulders riding up, and still they're in the gym lifting heavy dumbbells and then doing shrugs like this, like a chicken leg, like this. That's pushing them further into that forward head thing. So what it does over a period of time is that it compresses the airway, first of all, front to back, happens in the neck as well. It compresses the neck, it compresses the airway, muscles are always on, traps are on. Uh, Airway closure can also create sleep issues, headaches, uh, a lot of other issues. Like if the airway is kept open, a cervical spine which can actually rotate, the body is pretty happy. So one should have the buffer space to start with in order to squeeze it while lifting maximal weights. So someone whose goal is to lift heavy, at least start at a point where you have decent space so that you can squeeze it while lifting. If you don't have it in the start and you start muscle building and lifting heavy, you'll eventually end up squeezing all of what you had, and then issues might start.
Yeah, people have compression, like compression that they're not aware or conscious of in their body, especially with a scoliosis or a kyphosis, you've got a compression. And if you're going into the gym with this kyphosis holding, hyperkyphosis holding pattern or scoliosis holding pattern, and you're lifting weight, you're creating tension in your body,
Yes.
right, to build this muscle. And that tension is aggravating that compression that you already have.
Yes.
So what are your favorite ways to or activities? Let's say what are your favorite activities to promote that relaxed and let's say strong expansion?
I would say I'd start with side lying, but there are some people who are so compressed that side lying would hurt them. Maybe seated, side lying, or supine, or prone, depending on what suits the person the most, what looks decent to me. So suppose I get to a side lying, breathing in and out, side lying, and then starting with some,
This is
yeah,
lying in the
yeah,
side
yes, shoulders
and we're
unshrugged,
we're creating that expansion
front to back.
front and back.
Yes. Shoulders unshrugged, you're relaxed, you don't feel any chest muscle activity, you don't feel any back activity, you're lying down relaxed. Once you can do that, once your dimensions improve front to back, your shoulder external, internal improves, then probably I will start with some rolling activities, gentle, lazy rolling, which will help you get that subtle turn in the body. Like, so suppose you're turning to the left, you're, what happens in a turn, true turn, a lot of people just bend themselves into positions, but a true turn means you will expand. True turn to the left means you will expand left back rib cage and right front rib cage. A turn to the right means you'll expand the right back rib cage and the left front rib cage. So it works diagonally so that it the rib cage, the thorax has this volume of air in it, residual volume. It just pushes it through the scap, it goes forward and then it comes back. The scap pushes on the ribcage, it goes forward and then it comes back depending on the activity. This activity goes on. So that creates alternating reciprocating motion.
Would it be helpful to think about that like a like an aluminum can, like a soda can? Maybe it's crumpled. If you had the
Oh,
ability to
yes,
move in and
yes.
out, that's your thorax. So you're rolling in different positions and then you're expanding and contracting, and
Yes,
ultimately that
yes.
seems to be the goal,
Perfect.
right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. So that's what you're doing. You're creating shape change in the pelvis, in the thorax, this expansion, lazy, relaxed, no muscle
Nice.
activity, and then you should feel pretty good. And when you stand up, if someone sees your side pictures, if done well and with enough reps, you should feel much taller with a lot of chest wall expansion and back expansion.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the big challenge for us, especially with the social media, is like these big dramatic like things that are just easy to do and it create more movement. Even myself, I always thought like the first step is more aggressive stretching and force was the thing that was going to really kind of correct my posture. But as I go deeper and deeper into this, the real value is in those subtle movements. And the issue is that they take time. It takes practice. You might feel something the first time you do it, but are you going to look different in the mirror? Maybe not. Maybe you've improved by that much internally and the outward results haven't shown yet. But if you keep showing up, you keep working against those resistances that you have by breathing through them and allowing that expansion and contraction to have, eventually you start seeing and feeling the difference. And it's kind of a challenge to get people to see and believe that, I guess.
Absolutely. I tell people that change is going to take time, but always before and after session, I do a picture thing, before and after pictures of front, back, sides, and I show them, okay, this is improving, that is improving. So someone who has good adaptability in the system show good amount of change even in session one, and that helps to get the buy-in. So they're like, okay, I'm gonna do it because now I'm motivated to do it. People who get little changes or uh, I mean very minimal changes, but if they feel better symptom wise, like, oh, I feel much more taller, I feel relaxed, I feel like a lot of load has been taken off my body, if they feel, that's also a buy-in. Symptom wise buy-in, postural wise buy-in. Sometimes you get both at the same time, but the person has to benefit in some way or the other for them to understand, okay, this is working, and they will stick to it and they will do the work. So if they feel either of the two or two together, you get the buy-in.
Yeah, and that is the big challenge. Is
Yeah.
getting people to do the work. It's that compliance, and that's where the benefit of investing in
Yes.
yourself,
Yes.
investing in a professional with a program is going to be the commitment and the investment that usually is what it takes to actually start
Yes.
showing up. And I also kind of wanted to talk about the that phase of starting on the floor with these subtle types of movements, with the breathing and the movement as well. I've seen a lot of value from returning to a lot of these
Hmm.
baby-like movements, whether we're lying on our back,
Oh,
we're
yes.
rolling over, we're starting to wriggle around. Before we walked, this
Hmm.
is how we started interacting with movement. And we don't do these things for so long that parts of us start stiffening up, and it's a process of returning to that
Hmm.
childlike mobility and freedom of movement to explore the body. There's a lot to learn on the
Oh,
ground, on
yes.
the mat,
Yes.
like that.
Like crawling, rolling, crawling, a lot of things. There are a lot of things that can be done to create. So suppose lying down in this position on the ground, so that will create rotation in the body this way or that way. Or if you're crawling, that also creates alternating reciprocating movement. If you're just walking in a quadruped position like babies do, that also creates change in the body if you do it well. So there's a lot of things that can be done on the ground, on the mat, which can actually give you a lot of expansion, can also give you a lot of alternating reciprocating movement in the left and right. So yes, definitely.
Beautiful. Okay, so core, like how are you helping people at the moment? Is it online? Is it live? Is it courses? Is it in person? And where can they find you?
Usually. like 95% of my work is online, clients from my country, India, and also people from other countries, a lot of other countries who are my clients right now, as well as in person. So people who are in my city in India, they come to me. I do online, offline sessions in person, but usually it's online. So people who are in the other parts of this country or world can reach out to me, and yeah, I do online training as well. And people who can find me is
Okay. And where's the best way,
yes,
best place to get in touch?
fractal.biomechanics on Instagram.
Beautiful. Why fractal biomechanics?
Fractal biomechanics. So biomechanics, as that's what we are doing. Fractal. So this logo, it means it's the diaphragm of the human body, right? The right and the left. So the diaphragm itself is asymmetric. It's much more bigger and domed in the right side and much more flattened and descended on the left side. So that's the starting point of the asymmetry in the human body. Now coming to fractal. Fractal means patterns repeating, and if we observe the human body in depth, it's patterns repeating everywhere. Like rib cage and pelvis, they mimic each other. Even in the skull, things mimic each other. Like shoulder, hips, the foot. Whatever happens at the rib cage and the pelvis also happens at the foot. So that's pretty weird, and it also happens in the hands as well. Whatever happens in the foot is also happening in the hand. So that's how like patterns repeat, and hence I thought, okay, fractal would be the best name for this. So fractal biomechanics with the asymmetric diaphragm, so which symbolizes the body is asymmetric. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Cool. And do you see yourself as a programmer or an engineer? How do
I
you see your role in that, in those
So
fractal
because of
patterns?
my engineering background, so I was at corporate and I have an engineering degree. So because of that, my mind works that way, and I find it pretty fascinating to see how things repeat. I would say it's more of a body engineer kind of thing. So I see things, yeah. So I see things
Body
like where's the
engineer.
asymmetry, where's the
Awesome.
compression, and where's the expansion, and then giving them a solution which does expand the compressed.
Perfect. All right, Ankoor, thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
jumping on, sharing your wisdom. I commend you for the insights you're bringing to the field because I think you're looking at it in a great way, and looking forward to seeing what you get up to and how you're helping people. So thanks for coming on, and thanks everyone for tuning in.